In 2001, a real-world exercise tested the emergency response to a bioterror attack on the continental United States. The operation was called Dark Winter. Within just a few days, the simulation spiraled out of control. The operation predicted a rapid breakdown in essential institutions, civil disorder, and massive civilian casualties. Dark Winter has revealed how vulnerable we've become. Our lifestyle, our security, our safety depends on a delicate and unstable economy. We've created a system so complicated that we no longer understand how to control it. Oil, power, shipping, transport. We live in a complex world. And the more complex it gets, the more fragile it becomes. The system is built on a global supply chain that gets things where they're needed, just in time. We've created a house of cards. Remove just one, and everything falls apart.
Stories are the medium where we communicate beliefs, knowledge, and lessons that help reinforce our cultural expectations. The book 1 Second After was many millennial-aged preppers' introduction to a real scenario. Never mind that it would be a highly difficult scenario to accomplish for any country that isn't first in military development, but EMP blasts and outages can theoretically be harnessed as weapons that a country can successfully wield in a controlled manner one day. Many millennials who were just starting their journey as preppers began considering a total grid-down scenario and started preparing for these things. Maybe 1 second after was introduced by an older prepper, or they may have found it through natural curiosity of the subject. Either way, the cultural net was cast, and it claimed who it could. A great opportunity to spread a deeper message arose in the last decade. While playing a particular game, it occurred to me that preppers today are missing an important way to connect the mindset of being prepared, of setting the example and being a leader, to a younger generation that would be more open to playing a game rather than being forced to sit through another YouTube video about how the 8th nuclear war this year has just begun. And to future-proof this part, remember, a broken clock is right twice a day. The truth is that you can't control what another country as a whole does, whether it's waging war, launching a nuke, or imprisoning people for any reason that it may deem lawful. What you can control are your own actions. You can set the example, and by your actions, you can help influence the behaviors of people who look up to you. Now, what game deals with this kind of lesson? A game that includes a pandemic and decimates the world. One filled with opportunities to understand how people can go too far in a quest for revenge, learn about the importance of storing water and farming crops, and how enforcing some semblance of law and order is absolutely crucial. The video intro came from the Tom Clancy Division game series ad. I specifically want to focus on the Division 2, as I think the factions are a little bit more fleshed out and have better real-world analogs to the world we've witnessed since 2020.
We took things for granted. We expected coffee in the morning. We expected free Wi-Fi. When those were taken from us, we survived. When communications broke down, the trains stopped and the internet went dark, we survived.
But when the pharmacies were looted and hospitals shut down, asthma became lethal. And with no police to protect you, did you own a gun?
Did your neighbor?
Some survived.
In the world of the Division, the disease nicknamed the dollar flu spread around Black Friday, where the volume of cash trading and travel was at its peak. Through the winter holiday season, it progressively broke down from there. The supply chain ground to a halt, and lawlessness would increase as police stopped showing up for a job that no longer paid or provided anything in return. Military units and civilian contractors would disperse or become something else entirely after helping enforce a quarantine around New York City. 72 hours after the disease hit Washington, D.C., public services broke down. The disease had a 90% fatality rate, with the very young, the old, and the disabled having the worst outcomes. Rumors of stockpiles of vaccines and food caused riots. Order broke down even further, and in the panic that followed, different groups formed.
We are a resilient species. When our society collapsed, we found ways to go on. And now, for the first time in centuries, what we want is also truly what we need. In the face of disaster, we helped each other.
We built new communities in the ruins of the old. We adapted. We survived. Established a new normal.
In The Division 2, resiliency is a key theme. Survivors in their camps who work with the player feature things like hydroponic farm systems, electrical storage solutions, schools for kids, markets, things that would continue the more advanced aspects of a community. But that positive and uniting aspect doesn't sit well with people who are more content with existing in the moment.
There are also those who build nothing, create nothing.
Hyenas preying on the weak. They've made our world bleed. But we don't stand alone. A brave few have sworn to protect us and save what remains.
The hyenas are a faction who are little more than disorganized hedonistic scavengers who raid and rely on violence, intimidation, and theft to get what they need. Each of the 6 major subclans within the hyenas have a rotating cast of leaders who take their roles through attrition or backstabbing. They are, at their very core, opportunists. Their rationale of operation is unchecked freedom to take what they want from anyone, kill who they want that isn't a member of the group, and prevent anyone who isn't ideologically like them from gaining or owning any territory that could be theirs. They speak like and appear to be in their late teens and early 20s, making up for their disorganized tactics with fanatical aggression when attacking, coupled with a high volume of fire from their weapons. You'd think that the military and police would help regain control and order in this situation, and in real life, I'm sure most would. But people forget there's another subset to the people we look to for protection. The people who joined because they love power. The True Sons of Liberty, are a paramilitary force comprised of Joint Task Force deserters and mutineers, led by a former field commander. Because they are actually the closest analog to a rogue division of the military, they are well trained and bring heavy firepower to a fight. You will get flanked if you leave yourself open to it. These are former Guardians who chose to become rogue elements after their leaders started increasing the amount of control exercised against the civilian population, partly to counter the virus and enforce lockdown, but more because of the personal belief that the government wasn't being hard enough.
Bar the gate, Sergeant. Looks like you got a riot brewing. Lock and load! Put it down.
The True Sons killed many civilians in quarantine throughout the city for refusing to obey commands, and bombed a civilian settlement known as the Castle for refusing to pay tribute, eliminating all the men, women, and children, except for 7 individuals that got away. Through their training and equipment, other militia groups were either assimilated or eradicated. These 2 groups are full of a cast of characters who are irredeemable assholes. One faction plays the middle ground of retribution and rage that went too far extremely well. The Outcasts are survivors of the quarantine at Roosevelt Island. It was poorly run, with many people dying through neglect and fear. This large group of people, kept behind fences under the guns of the people who would become the True Sons, would spend quarantine going through things like watching their family members die with little to no meaningful help. being forcibly separated from loved ones, knowing their family member would die alone.
Who's gonna take care of my little girl?
Bodies would end up stacked on top of more bodies, with hints of burn pits everywhere. Many of the survivors became asymptomatic carriers of the new and deadly smallpox variant, and because of their treatment, their goal is to infect as many people with the virus and inflict as much damage to the groups they feel had wronged them.
How could anyone forgive what they did to us?
While their pain does elicit more sympathy than the desire of a power-hungry paper general and narcissistic young folks who want to behave like animals, their internal declaration of their primary objective is what clearly puts them in the category of nihilists that went too far. The city left us to die. We will not stop until everyone in it lies cold, sick, and dead. Eradicated. Vengeance will be ours.
It's not just our right. It's our obligation. To those that didn't make it. Do you understand? I understand.
I won't really touch on the interesting endgame faction that appears after the main story. They are a wholly separate issue to examine. Now, why did I spend this time talking about a video game? What a waste of time when the world is collapsing, things are going to hell out there, there's other things to talk about. Culture. Look at the recent swing back to sanity, the push against everything that normal people felt was wrong but too afraid to talk about. We get to where we are through culture. Each generation adds something new to the mix of media that lend a heavy influence. Books, radio, movies, TV, mass media, games. Most Gen Z pay attention to technological advances. Whether older generations want to acknowledge it or not, video games are a storytelling medium that is important. People argued about movies and TV rotting the brain. Before that, the Victorian-era scourge of escapist novel reading would create a lazy human race. I'm sure the most negative and jaded people of every generation helped heap their misery from their failings in life onto the next generation since forever. More adults and youth play games now than at any point before, with tech-savvy millennials raising equally tech-savvy children. The stories we consume shape who we are. Look at the action movie 80s, the dystopian and bleak movies of the late 90s and early 2000s. You can see the impact it's had shaping who we are. I've repeatedly talked about having skills to survive, but also taking a proactive approach in participating in culture. That's how you really mold the world of tomorrow. You don't shun participation in the arts like the Spartan. You make it last and impact the future like the Athenians did for the Romans. The Romans were wonderful artists and writers and performers as much as they were conquerors. The last true Spartan king, Agesilaus, was mocked on a beach in Egypt when he arrived to aid an ally in tattered rags. Instead of telling our children the oversimplified mantra, "Be practical," we should instill our values in their minds and teach them skills and encourage their desire to explore. If we raise them right, we won't be afraid of any road they'll choose, knowing that our beliefs will guide them. At that point, we don't have to tell them to be practical. We can just tell them to go and make an impact. They will be extensions of ourselves and perpetuate everything we are and hold dear. Why not give them a game where they're going to be the hero holding the world together?
They unite us.
Remind us that we are one people. They are our shield and our light. But if that light goes out,
Who can save us then?